Today, I want to talk about how following the traditional path, the safe path, is actually the riskiest path you can take. You see, this is actually a concept that my mentor, James from the Natural Lifestyle, had said about maybe like 6 years ago in a YouTube video. And he talked about how people choose the traditional path of going to college, getting a job, having a stable career, making money, having a wife and kids is actually the riskiest path, or it's actually has more risk than choosing a path that prioritizes fulfillment and purpose. And the reason why the traditional path is riskier, because there's a high chance that you're going to experience a lot of unsatisfaction. You're going to experience a lot of disappointment, and at the end of your life, you will most likely feel a great sense of regret. And that's true for, you see that's very common. If you find videos or resources where they interview people who are at the end of their lives and they ask them a bunch of questions, so many of them say that they wish they would have worked less, that they wish they would have not listened to their parents so much, that they wish they would have traveled more, given more time to themselves to pursue their passions, their dreams, more creative pursuits, to spend more time with their loved ones and more time in nature, these things. And that's kind of sad to hear, especially that's, I think, really, like, for me, it was hearing that really struck me hard. It really made me question if I was on a good trajectory, if I was in alignment to living my dream life. And James's video made me reflect on that, on really questioning, as I was probably 20 years old, like really questioning if that was something that I wanted to go through, if I really wanted to prioritize money, career, and the status, the superficial approval from my family, instead of really listening to a deep part of myself, to my soul, and prioritizing what I think really matters the most, which is those things: personal freedom, pursuing your passions, spending time in nature with your loved ones, these things. And what really made me decide to stay on this path of constant uncertainty by pursuing my own passions and listening to my heart and following my soul was meeting this guy who was, when I met this guy when I was on a 5-week road trip across the country. And I traveled from Ohio to all the way to a little bit south of Yellowstone, and I stayed in a campground for a night, and I met this guy who was on a bicycle with his dog, and his dog was like pretty big dog, and he was carrying his dog in like this back trailer, so he was bicycling on that. And I had assumed that he was a local who just liked to carry his dog around, and maybe he was staying in the campgrounds for a night for a party or something. I talked to him while we were at the checkout, me and my partner at the time, and I was like, yeah, we're coming from Ohio. We're just looking to spend the night before we go to Yellowstone. And I asked him, where are you from? Like, you're local, right? And he was like, no, I'm also from Ohio. But I'm like, how, like, so did you fly here and then you bought a bike here? He's like, no, I biked all the way from Ohio to Wyoming with my dog. And I was like so mind blown to hear that. And I was like, wait, how long did that take? Because it took us taking our time by car like about a week and a half. And he was like, oh, I've been on the road for about a month and a half. So he's been biking every single day for about a month and a half. And I was like, that just sounds so crazy. Like, I need to talk to you more, find out more about your story. And I invited him over to my campground, and we had a little fire pit. And he began to tell me his life story. He was in his mid 40s. And he told me that he was on this bike journey to find himself. Because basically, he didn't know himself at all. And he was deeply unfulfilled. He said that what prompted the journey was a very tragic accident had occurred. His ex-wife's sister had tragically died in a car accident, and it really devastated her, and it made her reflect on a lot of things and reflect on her own life. And she just decided that she needed to spend time alone and grieve and to just find fulfillment. And she realized she wasn't fulfilled, and so she asked for a divorce. So he got divorced very quickly in a matter of a couple of months, and then he was left with a big mansion, empty mansion with no kids, and a bunch of cars and a bunch of money, because he said that he was well off financially. He said he was a software engineer making a lot of money, and he had said that prior to that he was in like a trade. He was also making a lot of money in that, and he had his investments in real estate and all this stuff, and he was making a lot of money, essentially what he told me. He said he was able to buy all the fancy toys, fancy cars, any gadget he wanted, splurge on a bunch of things, satisfy his wife, buy her a bunch of things. And he said, but there he was, divorced, with this house and all these things, yet he felt like he was empty. And he decided that he needed to make a change for himself and with his life. He said that at the time of the journey, he was at the start of his bike journey, he was really obese. Actually, he was really overweight. But when I heard that, I didn't believe him, because he was literally super skinny when I was talking to him. And he said he just basically only ate bananas and granola the last month and a half, and he had shed all the weight from all that bike riding. And he was saying that he was obese. He didn't know himself. He always prioritized his parents' fulfillment. He listened to what everybody else wanted of him. He was living a life for others, and he had accomplished all these things in his career. And he had all the accolades. But he said at the end of the day, that didn't matter. At the end of the day, that didn't give him a sense of deep purpose and fulfillment. And he knew that something had to change, and something that he needed to make a big decision on whether or not he wanted to continue with that path or take a risk and find himself and to listen to his heart. And so that's what that bike journey was about. Him finding himself, him being with himself, him having the time for the first time. He was 45 at the time. For the first time in his life, being able to actually listen to his inner voice, actually have the ample amount of time to reflect and to process his life up until that point. And he was telling me a lot of things came up during that whole time, like all this trauma that he had been suppressing, all this sadness, all this negative emotions, and all that was coming up as he was on this process and this journey. And he basically told me that, if he could give me any advice, that I should definitely prioritize listening to my heart and following a path that deeply fulfills me, and to not chase what society deems as a successful path, and to not prioritize your parents' desires over yours. Because he was like, unfortunately they're gonna die one day, and then you still have the rest of your life to live, and you have to be able to live that life. They're not going to live it for you. So he gave me some good advice. And I never saw him again, but that really stuck with me. And to this day, I think about that all the time. I'm always tempted to just choose a more comfortable path, a more path that seems certain, a path with a little bit more security. But time and time again, I always think about what really matters at the end of the day, and choosing a path that is what people would deem as the riskiest path, which is following your heart, not prioritizing financial security, not prioritizing, a traditional career. Choosing that path is, in the long term, actually becomes the least riskiest path, because there's actually less chance of you at the end of your life feeling a sense of regret. And that, to me, is a big motivating factor.